Welcome back. Let's jump right into today's explainer. We're looking at a massive landmark case from the South African Constitutional Court, Bannatyne versus Bannatyne. This isn't just a dispute about child support. It's a story that completely exposes a broken system and actually redefines how human rights apply when the justice system just flat out fails.
Here's how we're breaking it down today. We'll start with the initial fight for child support, look at the broken maintenance system itself, see what happens when you escalate to the High Court, dive into the children and gender equality aspects, and finally, look at the Constitutional Court's ruling.
Right off the bat, we have to ask ourselves a pretty heavy question. What actually happens when a legal system, one specifically built to protect the most vulnerable, like children, just fails them? Because to truly understand the sheer desperation in this case, we have to look at what it means when a state-designed safety net completely unravels.
Part 1. The fight for child support.
So let's look at Nadina Bannatyne. She was caught in an exhausting, desperate legal fight just to get maintenance for her 2 young kids from her ex-husband, Lori. When you look at the timeline, it is wild. They divorce in 1999, agree on maintenance and medical aid, right? Standard stuff. But Lori doesn't pay regularly. By January 2000, he goes to court, gets his payments reduced, and then still falls into arrears. Nadina forces his hand, he pays up in April, and then, bam, immediately defaults again. By July, he goes totally rogue. He reduces payments on his own, stops paying medical expenses, and literally removes his own kids from his medical aid scheme. After that, zero, nothing. Nadina tried the maintenance courts over and over, but she got absolutely nowhere, which pushed her to a desperate high court application in early 2001.
Now, you might be thinking, well, aren't there standard civil enforcement methods for this? Yes, but they completely failed Nadina. Normally, you issue a writ of execution to seize and sell someone's property if they don't pay. Well, Nadina tried this twice. The first time, the property was released because the woman Lori was living with stepped in and claimed the stuff actually belonged to her and Lori's kids from a previous marriage. Okay, so they try again. The second time, they attach a car. Turns out, it's on a hire purchase agreement, meaning Lori didn't even legally own it. So these legal loopholes basically blocked the entire enforcement machinery. Nadina is left financially drained, burning through her savings, cashing out insurance policies, with absolutely no way to support her kids.
Which brings us to Part 2. A broken maintenance system.
The thing is, Nadina's nightmare wasn't a one-off. It highlighted a massive systemic crisis in South Africa at the time. Now, on paper, the Maintenance Act of 1998 looked fantastic. It was meant to be speedy and effective. You lodge a complaint, an officer investigates, they hold an inquiry, and if someone defaults, boom, civil execution or even criminal penalties. The design was there to protect children.
But the reality? A totally different story. The Commission for Gender Equality stepped in with hard empirical data showing the system was just crumbling. Those speedy remedies replaced by agonizing postponements, exactly like what Nadina went through when Lori just kept delaying things. The law also promised these dedicated maintenance investigators to track down hidden assets, which sounds amazing, right? But due to budget cuts, they essentially didn't exist. So instead of a reliable enforcement machine, you had undertrained staff, terrible administration, and zero resources. The whole system was basically a mirage.
This takes us to Part 3, escalating to High Court.
Hitting a brick wall at the lower courts, Nadina took a huge swing. She asked a higher court to literally throw Lori in prison for contempt. To understand this, we need to look at a concept called process in aid. Normally, a magistrate's court enforces its own orders. You don't just jump straight to the high court. It's super expensive and it jams up the system. But process in aid acts like a safety valve. It allows a high court to step in and enforce a lower court's judgment if that lower court is totally ineffective. Nadina's argument was simple. The maintenance system is so broken, the high court literally has to intervene.
And guess what? The High Court completely agreed with her. They slapped Lori with a strict order, 90 days in prison for contempt. But they suspended it for 5 years, as long as he paid his arrears within 3 months and kept up his monthly payments. A huge win, right? Well, Lori appealed, and the Supreme Court of Appeal actually overturned the High Court's decision. They basically said, hey, Nadina hasn't exhausted all her options in the lower courts yet. That reversal is what forced Nadina to take it all the way to the Constitutional Court.
Moving into Part 4. Children and gender equality.
Once the Constitutional Court gets involved, this whole thing levels up. It's no longer just a fight over unpaid bills. It's a fundamental question of constitutional rights. Justice Mokgoro anchored the unanimous judgment on this incredibly powerful idea from Section 28 of the Constitution. A child's best interests are paramount.
While parents have the primary job to maintain their kids, the state has a constitutional duty to provide the infrastructure to make sure it actually happens. If the maintenance courts are failing, the state is failing its duty to the children, plain and simple.
The court didn't stop there. They called out a massive gender disparity here. Looking at the evidence, they pointed out that when a marriage breaks down, the mother almost always becomes the custodial parent, and this creates a brutal double disadvantage. Custodial mothers are overburdened with care responsibilities, which tanks their ability to work, leaving them totally under-resourced. Meanwhile, non-custodial fathers generally stay employed, don't have the daily care burdens, and actually become economically enriched. So a broken maintenance system doesn't just hurt kids, it actively destroys the constitutional value of gender equality. It just leaves disempowered women to shoulder the entire burden alone.
Finally, Part 5, the Constitutional Court Rules. Now, here's where it gets incredibly ironic. After months and months of claiming he was broke and dodging the system, the very second the High Court threatened Lori with 90 days in jail, he miraculously produced the exact amount owed down to the cent, 34,366 rand and 6 cents. He suddenly found the money from selling some fixed property. It literally proved exactly what Ndana had been saying the whole time. He had the money. He was just weaponizing a weak system to avoid paying. Ultimately, the Constitutional Court overturned the Supreme Court of Appeal. They said, look, because these lower maintenance courts are so clearly failing vulnerable women and children due to massive logistical issues, going to the High Court for contempt was absolutely the right constitutional remedy. The court essentially said that when the standard legislative remedies are a dead end, the High Court must step in to protect those rights. Ndana jumping to the High Court? Totally justified.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I want you to think about this profound point from Justice Mokgoro's judgment. If people can just habitually ignore court orders and get away with it, the whole justice system loses its credibility. The rule of law itself takes a hit. For the people who need the law the most, like vulnerable children and disempowered women fighting for their basic entitlements, a system that can't enforce its own rules is a system that strips away their human dignity. It makes you wonder, if the law can't be enforced, who is it really protecting?